Radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA online at WTKA.com. Sam Webb, Mr. Ira Weintraub on the other side, and joining us or rejoining us, as you just heard from Seth Fisher, who gave us a great update on how his son Ryan is doing out of the ICU on the mend. So great to hear that. And great support from the MGoBlog community. For those that are just joining us, Seth, you can sort of let them know how much their support has meant to you.
Well, I thank you. So the community, like I just posted on the board being like, hey, this is why I'm not writing this week, right? And out of the blue, people just started sending us things. A lot of it has been like food donations or like, DoorDash. I think we have a good bank of DoorDash money now, and I can just order all my favorite Ann Arbor foods. So we had Fritas the other night. I was like, okay, we're doing this. I just the only thing I can't get anyone to do is like pick it up and bring it here. But we found this Korean barbecue place. I don't know if anyone knows about Soul Street Barbecue, but if you don't know about that place yet, it is incredible.
Where's that at?
It's on Plymouth. I mean, it's like a hole in the wall. You can't find it unless you're. I shouldn't be telling people about this because, yeah, you look like you're pulling into an apartment building.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
they
We'll
do.
keep that in mind. Well, definitely support from your viewership, your listenership, your readership over at the blog. Definitely can feel their support through you. Of course, the guy who started it all at MGoBlog, Mr. Brian Cook. Brian, how are you this morning?
I'm good.
Glad to have you, man. And I could only imagine what Brian Cook's dauber was like last week on the heels of all of this news of upheaval in college football. So one I know what it was like when I was on before it was all official. I can only imagine what it was like last week. All right, so now we're a week removed from that, and it feels like we finally gotten to the point where there's just no more even possible right now, unless Notre Dame changes their stance on independence, which I see no sign or signal of that happening. Do you sense any chance of Notre Dame's position changing on this in the aftermath of the ACC or the four members of the ACC saying, no, we don't want to add Cal and Stanford to the mix?
I mean, I just don't think to change conferences for Notre Dame for all of their sports, they would have to join either the SEC or Big Ten, which they don't want to do. So the only thing that I think would ever cause Notre Dame to give up their independence is if they didn't have a path to the playoff. And unfortunately, college football has not been ruthless enough with the Irish to be like, yeah, no way. So yeah, they're going to be independent until such time as they cannot win a national championship.
Yeah, I wonder if that day will ever come where the Big Ten and SEC, where they come together and say, okay, we're going to play hardball with the Irish specifically. There's a meeting coming up on the 30th, which to me is going to be one of the more visible examples of whether or not the Big Ten and the ACC are capable of acting on a unified front. So they're going to the college football playoff meeting, normally scheduled it was already scheduled for the 30th. Playoff expansion is afoot. It's coming next year, but now the Pac-12 is no more. So what's going to happen with the Pac-12 share? What's going to happen with their voting power? Now, the position of the Big Ten is, well, what should happen to their share? You should have it dispensed among the other teams, and it should be proportional to the number of teams in the conference, which obviously serves the Big Ten's purpose. And you would think that the Big Ten and the SEC, from a voting block standpoint, will want to be unified, so they wield the most influence, and they could step in to this meeting, Seth, and say, you know what? If you guys, ACC, if you other people who are in this meeting decide that we shouldn't get more voting power and we shouldn't get more money, all right, that's fine. We're going to remember that down the line because we're going to go do our own thing. If the Big Ten and the SEC got together with that kind of or that unified front, I really think they could wield a lot more influence at this meeting coming up on the 30th.
Absolutely. Well, what this has all been about is money. So they're gonna do whatever they can to grab more money. Because obviously, I know this has been hammered to death, but there are no, even though we have elected officials in the Regency to selecting these presidents, and the presidents are supposed to be serving the higher good, and the athletes are supposed to, or the NCAA itself is supposed to be there to ensure things are working out well for the athletes. None of those parties seem to be interested in anything but what can my little area bring in the most. So, yeah, what they're all doing right now is they're lining it up because the players are going to get a piece of the TV money, and they don't want the piece of the TV money to come from them. So they have to find a way to make more money to pay the players, so they don't have to lose any of the money that they're making. And I don't really care now. Every time I see even the adding Washington, Oregon, it's not like I'm looking at this and going, yay, this is going to change my feelings or anything, because it's not going to stay put. They have not created a stable system, and it's not going to be stable if the Big Ten and the SEC are coming together and saying we want to professionalize the sport more, because we have basically professional franchises here. It's not going to be stable as long as Rutgers and Maryland are in the Big Ten, and Oregon is not able to play. They have to play Rutgers instead of playing Oregon State. Like this is not tenable. So the systems that they've created right now, and the meeting that they have on the 30th, and all of that, it doesn't really ring a bell for me, because they're going to blow it up. They gave us a schedule a couple months ago and said, here's our schedule for the next 4 years, and that didn't last a month.
Right. No, you're right. You're right. Well, the other big story that happened while I was out, or certainly since we last met, was the report that came out over the week with a statement from the NCAA saying this is not about the cheeseburger, this infractions case about against Michigan, which, again, to me, the cheeseburger has been a metaphor anyway. But he wanted it to be, making this comment very clear that people are trivializing the seriousness of these infractions against Michigan, violating their own policy when it comes to commenting on ongoing infractions cases. What does that say to you, Brian, about the NCAA's case, their feeling, their leverage in this case, because it really feels like they're flailing a bit now?
Well, Dan Wilkin had a pretty good article about this, where he pointed out that, only one side of this case can say anything. Also, the NCAA is apparently responding to message board posters, because nobody associated with Michigan has said anything other than I can't comment.
Right.
So why is the NCAA enforcement complex on your board, Sam? Why are they reading 24/7? I mean, maybe they just need the updates on what's going on in fall camp, but then why are they reading the other threads? I don't know. And so it does kind of feel like they're going to try to put their foot down, and Michigan's just like, we're not having this. We had a program with, what was it, like 18 level 1 violations, with the head coach directly paying people, and they got nothing. They got a slap on the wrist. And you're going to come here and say that the University of Michigan had a couple recruits on campus, gave them a hamburger, and that's worthy of something? Like, come on, man. Like, this feels like the last act of a dying organization. And they feel like, oh, we got to do something. This guy's really annoying. And I'm sure Jim Harbaugh has been exceptionally annoying through this whole process.
Well, he's never. So let me, full disclosure, I have not had a conversation with him. I wouldn't tell you if I had, but I can tell you categorically that I haven't had a conversation with him about this. But I know him well enough to know he will never say, Seth Fisher, that he lied or misled. That is never going to happen. So if you're at that impasse and you have an axe to grind with Jim Harbaugh, well, what do? clearly his response has been what it's supposed to be. No comment. As much as he wants to say something, he isn't. So now it looks like he's going to coach every game. What does this spell for the future? Is this a stance of a guy who feels like, you know what? At the end of the day, NCAA is going to be even more toothless than they are now. In a year, it won't even matter what kind of punishment they try to rain down, or like some national pundits are speculating, he's just going to coach this season, win a national championship, and go off to the NFL.
The NCAA, one of the problems they've had because they've been an incompetent group of nincompoops for well over 20 years at this point. You know, we point at Tennessee because the 18 level 1 violations. If you took half of half a glass in any program in the SEC, or half the schools, and I know stuff about Michigan State. I know some things about Michigan that happened under Rich Rod or Lloyd that are way worse than anything that's probably happened under Harbaugh, as far as like breaking the NCAA rules are concerned. But their system was never really functional unless the presidents cared, and the only thing they had to go on was Michigan's president cared, and all the presidents of schools that don't care, they can't touch them. That's their system. And because that system is so weak, because I think it started with Miami, they had like a booster who just, the guy was running ragged and then told them everything. And then they couldn't get anything on him because Miami said, go eat shoe. So that's been their process and that's been their system. And because it's been going on for so long, anyone who's serious in that organization is long gone. If you know what you're doing, if you have a level of competency beyond a 6-year-old who has Miller-Fisher syndrome, you are probably not working at the NCAA. You are, off. You're working for one of the schools, right? You're in a compliance department. So that leaves a vacuum for these jobs where, you can go and investigate Jim Harbaugh if you want to. So if someone's got, a nephew and they want to get them a job, they can just stick them in the NCAA in the enforcement, and boom, you're immediately number 3. Or if you are a rich guy and you got nothing else to do, you can quote volunteer for one of these jobs, and then you can go and grind whatever axe you want to. And I'm sure there's a difference between Harbaugh and his needs, because Harbaugh's like, yeah, I might be in the NFL next year anyway. What do I care what I do next year? And the needs of Michigan, who are like, we want to be the school that's not cheating. We want to be the school that everyone looks to, that shows people how it's supposed to be done. So I wonder if there's some incongruency between what Harbaugh wants and what Michigan wants, and maybe that's one of the reasons why the quote talks broke down. Was that Michigan was trying to say, look, maybe Michigan themselves was like, okay, we'll do 4-game suspension and whatnot. And the NCAA leaked that. And, Harbaugh's not talking, but other people are talking. Other people know where Harbaugh stands on this thing. And his needs are definitely not the needs of the NCAA. So the whole thing is ridiculous. The fact that they're going after Michigan now is just, if you understand how a dying organization works, that's the only thing they can do. They bring in people who have access to grind.
Yeah, man. To steal the new word in our lexicon, thanks to Seth Fisher and Ryan Fisher, it's still really bitty though.
Yeah.
That the NCAA can go out and comment on this, and Harbaugh is basically powerless to defend himself publicly. They haven't even taken to doing so privately, which I certainly would do. I mean, I get why they aren't, but the first leak from the NCAA was, they didn't have a name attached to it, but it was them. It'd be very easy for Harbaugh and Tom Morris to do that. They have their connections in the media that they can float stuff to, but they've chosen not to do that. And seeing that, that's what made me think he's just a flipping thing. He's like, they don't even matter for one or two reasons. Either he thinks they won't be around much to do anything in the future anyway, or say, hey, man, I'm gonna win the championship and then I'm out anyway. So we'll see how things go.
I wish Ward Manuel wasn't like one of 8 people in the entire world who still takes the NCAA seriously. Because this could have all stopped really quickly if Michigan just said, you're not doing an investigation here. He'll tell you what we did, and then you're gonna have to you have to live with that. Instead of Michigan allowed them in. Michigan was trying to play ball. And that's kind of one of the reasons we got to this point in the first place is Michigan, not necessarily Harbaugh, but Michigan makes the decision. Ward Manuel and Santaono are the ones who make these decisions, not Harbaugh. Michigan let them in.
I think they're in retrospect, maybe the mistake was, to your point, conceding anything, because Michigan made concessions here. I think the anticipation was that would get it over with. And clear what became evident is that the NCAA has an agenda beyond just holding Michigan accountable for violating the rules. They want to get Harbaugh specifically. They want Jim Harbaugh. Now, why that is, I have no clue. But that is what become evident.
Yes, you do.
Why do they want Jim? I mean, what is
Jim Harbaugh? Yeah. Can you imagine getting Jim Harbaugh in a room and trying to talk to him about this stuff in 2023? He would make you feel like the most useless person in the history of the universe, and then you'd be like, man, that guy made me feel bad. I'm going to do something bad to him. That's all that's going on here.
I agree that happened, but that it would carry this thing out this far, where they wouldn't take an organization that needs a win. Like, a win was being gift wrapped. Like, you got Michigan on multiple level 2 violations, right?
No, but level 2, I mean, that's not a win. No more than the Tennessee stuff was a win. The Tennessee stuff was a final affirmation that you can do literally anything, and the NCAA isn't going to ban you from the postseason for even 1 year.
Well, but the concessions for Michigan came prior to the lack of punishment for Tennessee. I mean, they could have had this win back in, January.
Yeah, but level 2 violations aren't a win. Ohio State has, 25 a year or 50 a year or something, right?
Everybody has that number a year. It's not just Ohio State.
Yeah. So, well, at any rate, they want to get Jim, and it sounds like they got told, go eat. Well, I was about to make another rip on Biddy, but I better stop there. Right. right.
Something about bit.
Absolutely. All right, so let's switch gears and get off of that. I got a call from CBS before the press conference on, what was it, Tuesday, and they were like, hey, all right, can you provide us some video of Harbaugh's press conference, because we want to run a whole part of our newsreel on him reacting to the NCAA's statement. And I was like, so you're gonna want a one-word response, because that's what you're gonna get. And that's exactly what he did. He spoke mostly about position battles, guys. And so most intriguing to me was his talk about the offensive line, and particularly the tackle position, where he came out saying Carson Barnhart has been the leader of the pack halfway through. And I'm wondering, how struck were you by that, or by anything he had to say about the position battles halfway through fall camp?
Yeah, that jumped out to me too. I'm starting my season preview write-up of the offensive line, and I was just going over Barnhart and Trente Jones from last year, and I was like, man, I graded Trente Jones a lot better than Carson Barnhart. And I looked at Pro Football Focus, and we have some issues with their offensive line grading, but most of that goes away when you're talking about teammates, because they're being graded by the same guy against more or less the same opponents in the same scheme. And they had Trente Jones like 15 points clear of Barnhart, which is a huge gap. So I was surprised when it felt like Trente Jones was healthy enough to play last year, because he was getting on the field for those like bonus tight end snaps, that kind of stuff. But he wasn't back in the starting lineup. And I'm a little surprised again this fall that Carson Barnhart apparently is at the front line of tackle, just because from what we've seen on the field, Carson has good feet. He's agile. He's quick. He's pretty decent in pass protection. But if you get JTT on him, he's going to have a hard time holding up in the run game. He just hasn't been that forceful as a tackle thus far in his career. And maybe that's changed. I mean, players develop at different rates, and offensive linemen develop slower than just about anyone except quarterbacks. And we'll see how it pans out, but I was a little bit surprised that Barnhart was apparently number one on the tackle depth chart.
Seth?
I mean, the one thing Barnhart has is he's played for Michigan more than all these guys. He's got way more snaps. He's got way more games played. And you start the fall camp, I don't always trust the things coming out of fall camp. So when he says, Carson Barnhart's leading the pack, that could be a motivational thing. It could be we don't want Carson to feel left out because he's the former, he's a returning starter. Remember how much we did for Cade? We gave him, a completely fair shot to keep his job, even after JJ was passing him. And that's what you got to do when you've got a returning starter who's given everything to the program. He's back for his 5th year. Like Carson Barnhart's given you a lot. But he's the guy that you don't want to win that position because, like Brian said, he's not grading out as highly as Jones, even when they're playing already. Jones has, I think, more upside just because he's got those feet. He's got that strength that's out of this world. And Miles Hinton is out there too. And when he comes online, I wasn't expecting Hinton to be competing at even mention yet, but he's already getting some mention. But when he comes online, that's going to be something too.
He's getting some mention, but what I think this is he did not redshirt at Stanford. He did play in 2020, so he should have a 6th year available. So what I feel like this is he's going to redshirt this year, try to get right as a football player. Some of his offseason quotes have been like, I haven't really been focused on this. I haven't taken this as seriously as I should have. And so this feels like a ramp-up year for him. And then Ladarius Henderson didn't participate in spring. So it makes total sense why he is not on top of the depth chart entering fall camp. I think the expectation from everybody is that Ladarius Henderson will take that job. Just because, he could have gone to the NFL draft and probably been a 3rd or 4th round pick last year. And I don't think Carson Barnhart is at that level. And so then it really goes back to the right tackle job. Whether it'll be Trente Jones or Carson Barnhart. And my expectation was it would be Trente Jones.
Trente Jones, yeah.
Because you remember last year, that was not a position battle that went into the season, right? At the beginning of fall camp, Harbaugh said Trente Jones is the front runner, and it never really wavered from that. And I think what we saw on the field is like, okay, I understand why that was the case. So things change. Guys develop. We'll see.
Yeah, I think he was also laying the foundation for the Michigan method, as some other program called it, where you're gonna have one set of guys start one game, and the next set of guys start game 2, and then
is that going to happen this fall?
That's what Harbaugh intimated.
Yep.
Yeah, honestly, I've started writing this up, and the second string line. You got Percy, you got El Hadi, you have either Crippen or Raheem Anderson, both of whom I think would be starting on every team in this league except maybe Ohio State. And you got, Jones and or Barnhart at right tackle. And then really the only place on the entire offense where you don't have someone who is very promising or experienced is maybe right guard. But then you have Reese Atterbury, who the program thinks pretty highly of. So this is a situation where I think the second string offensive line could get some real live fire snaps against, the non-conference schedule, which is not good this year, and come out okay. And I would be really interested to see that.
Yeah, man. And the interesting thing, looking back on last year's experience, that would probably fuel you as Harbaugh to do this even more, is the biggest competition for Cade and JJ, for that matter, in the first couple of games was not the opponent; it was the circumstance, and it wasn't the opponent that got the better of Cade as much as it was the circumstance. It just seemed like the magnitude of the competition just made him press and made him not play to the level that we had seen him play prior to that. And you wonder if you're Harbaugh, even though these first couple of games are sucky opponents, you want to see how guys react under live fire, right? Because we saw it. Sometimes it doesn't even matter if the opponent is sucky, if the guy just can't stand up to the moment. And that was Cade last year. We'll see if it has a similar effect to any of these guys on the offensive line. So.
Yeah, especially on the offensive line, because so much of the offensive line stuff is mental. It's processing information. It's taking unexpected developments from the defense and managing to redirect and get your block. And even if you're playing a team that's not very good, that you can physically dominate, like they're going to be throwing curveballs at you. And it's not going to be like spring practice where you know what the offense is doing back to front, it's a different team. So I think there's a lot you can learn in there. I mean, I have done these UFRs for a long time, and I will clip backup offensive linemen against, Hawaii's third string, because you can learn stuff from that. And there's a couple of Raheem Anderson clips from last year that are great, like recognition, just kind of stuff where I'm just like, man, I can't believe this guy isn't pushing to start. But you look at the guys in front of him, and it's like, well, sometimes it do be like that.
Yeah.
Right. All right, so I need you guys to help me with something as we come back on the other side. So it's preview season. You guys have a great preview magazine. I know you looked at all these other teams, and I was struck. I did an interview on the Cover 3 podcast. One of the questions from Bud Elliott was, hey, so who's the best running back group in the Big Ten? And I'm like, how is this even a I mean, I reacted, and I'm like, how is this even a question? Like, is this like one of those deals where you just want to get a reaction out of me? But that's like a thing that people are talking about. Penn State having the better running back, and that's not to say that just as I think Michigan's is better, that Penn State is some slouch. But how is this even a discussion? Similar thing occurred yesterday with Steve Clark as we were previewing Penn State, and he said, Penn State is rated by Phil Steele as the best secondary in the Big Ten. I'm like, how is someone rating Penn State's returning secondary over Michigan's right now? So help me with that. Well, I want you to sort of assess for me where, from a position standpoint, those two in particular, but we can get into others, how Michigan lags behind some of the teams that they're, the rest of the Big Ten teams that they're being compared to that are ahead of them, according to some pundits. We'll get to that on the other side here. MGoBlog Roundtable on Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, The Ticket.
Clear on the radio.
I feel like I'm missing the memo on Penn State. I really do. Because, I mean, you got pundits acting like they're about to be the squad that rises up, and not just because of Drew Aller, but because they're talking about their secondary losing Joey Porter Jr. and Jair Brown and potentially being better. I don't know how you come to that conclusion.
Yeah, maybe they're listening to you talking about Kalen King all these years, and they're like, okay.
I mean,
Sam loves this guy.
I do love Kalen King. I think that was a big miss for me. I think Michigan thinks they thought it was a big miss at the time.
Yeah.
God, you put him on this roster. Jesus.
Yeah. It's that, but who am I talking about more, Kalen King or Will Johnson?
Well, yeah, I mean, Will Johnson is probably going to be an All-American this year, but Kalen King could also be an All-American. Like, they're very close. And I think Johnson has more upside because of his size and he's younger, but like, if you're starting a secondary, Kalen King's a pretty good piece to start with.
So let's call that a wash then. I'll give that. We'll do this on here, but we'll say, even though I think it's Will, they balance each other out. I still got Rod Moore, who is one of the best safeties in college football. I still got Mikey St. Ristel, who could play corner, safety, or nickel, and probably be as good at any of the positions. But Harbaugh said we are at our best when he plays nickel, and we saw what a difference maker he can be there. And I think Makari Page is one of the most improved players in the secondary. The question mark you have is that other corner spot. But if you're looking at Penn State, you can't tell me they don't have one or two question marks just as big.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that. I mean, I think part of it is just like Michigan fatigue in these preview magazines.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Phil Steele isn't going to say Michigan has the best everything in the league.
I said that to Ira.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Is that what is going on here? That they're just trying, okay, well, I got to put some other team in there because I got Michigan at the top of the running backs. I got Michigan at the top of the offensive line. Like, I got to put some other squad up here. Maybe that's what's.
And they got Keaton Ellis too. It's not like they're, I like their defense. I mean, I think Penn State's going to have a better defense than offense. The reason I think people are overrating Penn State isn't their defense at all. It's they are looking at the stars on Drew Aller, the new stud.
Mm-hmm.
And Penn State always does this. They always get this new quarterback. Right? Remember Christian Hackenberg, his freshman year, he's like so great in the bowl game. And then the next year, he's like, okay, this guy's going to be a superstar. And he's the same Penn State quarterback they always have. You don't have an offensive line. These guys get ruined over time, and then they just kind of make it work. I think they had a really good quarterback last year, a great quarterback last year, and I think their Penn State fans kind of got fatigued, right? They got sick of Sean Clifford like they did with Hackenberg and forgetting the name of the guy between them too, but like they just
you being sick of Hackenberg was warranted.
I think that's a great. That's right.
fair. But Clifford was awesome. Clifford was awesome last year. If they think they're going to get better play out of Drew Aller than they got out of Clifford, they're nuts. They're nuts. I don't care. That guy was awesome last year. He made things work even when their offense was breaking down. You could not rush him on the outside because he was going to escape. And the amount of hits he took and got back up again, which you need to do when you have an offensive line. Penn State's got like one offensive lineman, and all the rest of them are terrible. Like Drew Aller is not that guy. He's not that accurate.
Yeah.
Back on radio in about 20 seconds, guys.
All right, sounds like a plan, my man. So we'll certainly get into that. Talk just a little tiny bit of recruiting. I'm sure you're seeing this on the blog, Brian, but folks are obviously in a panic. How concerned? What's your level of concern with how
all right, guys, here we go. Stand by.
Going with Michigan? We'll get into that as well.
On radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, online at WTKA.com. Got any home improvements you got to get done before the fall? It officially is here. Our friends at Chelsea Lumber are your one-stop shop. Chelsea Lumber, one of the oldest and largest lumber yards here in the state, serving customers in this community for over 100 years. But in that time, they've become much more than that. Great products, great people, great prices, and great service. Chelsea Lumber is where the home begins. So any of your home construction needs that you might have, home construction materials, lumber, roofing, cabinetry, tools, decks, doors, windows, paint, you name it, they got you covered over at Chelsea Lumber. 3 locations to serve you in Chelsea, Saline, and Bridgewater. You can also find them online at chelsealumber.com. So fellas, my MGoBlog brother, Seth Fisher, and of course, Brian Cook, I asked you in the break, and we kind of talked about it in the break. Where is this sentiment first that Michigan doesn't have the best running back tandem in the Big Ten? Understand when I ask that question, I'm not saying that Michigan has the best and then that Ohio State and Penn State are slouches. But how is this even a debate given what we saw from that group, this tandem last year? How do you even have a legitimate discussion about this like it's a question?
Well, I think the way you get there, and this is not me endorsing this, is one, you're Phil Steele and you're sitting down and you're trying to write your Big Ten preview, and like the top of every group is Michigan, and you're like, this is bad. I can't publish this. Nobody's going to buy this. And so you're like, Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton had pretty good years last year. And I mean, to be fair, those guys averaged about 6 yards a carry behind the Penn State offensive line, which is not the Michigan offensive line. So you can maybe fudge it. Now, is either of those get Blake Corum? No. Is either of those get Donovan Edwards? No. I mean, they're good. They're good. But they're not able to just dust people in the backfield like Corum, and they're not NFL level receivers like Donovan Edwards. Now, the secondary stuff is, I don't know. I mean, Kalen King is a hell of a piece to start a secondary with, and then their second cornerback returns as well, and he had a very solid year last year. His name escapes me. They got to replace a couple safeties, but they have a history at Penn State of producing safeties. So seems like every year, like before it was J.R. Hill, it was Jaquan Brisker the year before. So I think that you can maybe project and say that, like, okay, whoever they have stepping into that safety spot's going to be pretty good. But yeah, the main factor, I believe, is you got to spread the love around when you got a preview magazine.
Yeah, that's, I suppose, Seth. And then as I try to make that case, because I know it's not you making the case, Brian, but I'm trying to put myself in with these prognosticators. I'm looking at, okay, Penn State, Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, really, really good, but they sucked against Michigan, right? Both of those guys, they got destroyed statistically.
Well, what are those guys? They're speedbacks,
right?
right?
They got destroyed.
And Singleton, he breaks free. You're going to get some yards, and it's a lot harder to see the things that, I mean, it's not hard to see what Donovan Edwards does, right? But it's a little harder to see. Like when we started charting Blake Corum, when he started like having his takeoff in 2021, I was doing the charting. We did a podcast with Brian. Brian and I were doing a podcast together, and I'm like, I'm getting these numbers for him that are just ridiculous. And he's like, you got to be doing something wrong, because he was doing the charting before. And he's like, yeah, it can't be right. It can't be true. And Pro Football Focus was doing the same thing. I think they had him like one of the best players of all time. And when you watch the film, when you see the little things, but you know, these are big spread like when Phil Steele's doing it, he's not going to watch the film like that on every team. Phil Steele is going to know who's playing for every team and like basics about them. But he's got to lean on stats. He's not going to be able to do the kind of, you know, grainy work that we do on just a few players, right?
Well,
so we see things about Corum that they don't.
Well, do this, Phil Steele. Look at head to head, and they got just run out of the gym or run out of the stadium that day, where both Blake and Donovan had over 150 yards rushing in that game. And then look at them against Ohio State. Katron Allen and Nick Singleton didn't have big days against Ohio State like Donovan Edwards did. So I'm just like, I'm trying to figure it out, like how you. But okay, you get over to the secondary, and I think I'm finding myself in the same position, saying, man, Jair Brown was a player. Joey Porter Jr. was one of the best corners in the league, right? Even if you believe, even if you believe Kalen King is that dude, which I do, I look around at the other pieces of the secondary. I'm like, man, Michigan has more proven guys returning than Penn State. And, okay, maybe he's Manny Diaz's guy, right? Maybe Phil Steele, and he gets info from Manny Diaz all the time. Year one Manny Diaz versus year one of Jesse Minter. Who you taking? I'm trying to find how you arrive at Penn State.
Manny Diaz got rocked by Michigan last year. That makes me a little concerned for this year, because like the degree to which Michigan got Manny Diaz last year, I think what they're looking at is Michigan's second corner is we cast about until we got a guy from UMass, and he's leading the pack right now. That, you know, what they have on their second corner is Johnny Dixon, and Daquan Hardy's around too. So they've got like a couple like Jamon Green caliber players who've been around the program for a long time, played a lot of football, not necessarily going to go high in the NFL, but those guys can play Big Ten football. We know it. They have a very high floor for the guys that are filling in, where Michigan has this one spot. I think if you're, as Brian mentioned, if you're trying to fill in the best units of the Big Ten, and I know Alex Drain's trying to do this right now too on our site, and you're like, okay, you don't want to answer Michigan or Ohio State for everything. It's just, you can't. If you were doing these previews in the 70s, you'd have the same problem, okay? Truthfully, everyone knows Blake Corum's better. Truthfully, everyone knows that Michigan secondary's got two potential All-Americans in it. But if you're looking for reasons to put somebody else there and highlight what is a very good secondary with a very good defensive coordinator on what should be a very good team that they'll probably go 10-2 this year, this is your opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If Penn State goes 10-2 this year, they're just going to be like, "Oh, come on."
What are they going to do? Beat Ohio State?
They got to be the happiest team in the Big Ten about all this expansion, because they're like, "Get me out of this division."
yeah. I think 10-2 is about as good as it gets for Penn State, at least in my opinion. All right, so guys. It's been a pretty bleak place, at least around our site, when you talk about recruiting since I've come back, and even before, where it's, summer recruiting for Michigan hadn't been the best, to say the least. There have been some high profile losses, and the consistent theme there, if setting aside all the NIL talk, the consistent theme there is last visits. Losing guys to programs who got those players on campus for their last time before they made a decision. That was Justin Scott. That was certainly Aaron Scott. That was, we keep going down the line. There are a number of guys like that. David Poly. So many guys happen like that. And then there are the flips. So there is just recently here, We had my man from down at Deerfield Beach, and then now it looks like the Smith twins are about to flip. Against that backdrop, how concerned are you about Michigan recruiting? Starting with you, Brian.
Well, honestly, when Miami flips a Michigan recruit, they did us a favor, because that's telling on yourself, right? Like, the kind of person who's like, "Hey, I'm going to go to Miami to play football," isn't going to work out at Michigan, probably. Honestly, like, I just I just can't imagine. Like, okay, I could play at the University of Michigan, back-to-back Big Ten defending champions, or I could go play for Miami, a team that hasn't done anything in 25 years and plays in front of 12 people, all of whom are drunk 24/7. Just, I don't think it's a loss. I think that's someone who is going to wash out of the program. And Miami is doing us a favor. Smith twins going to Kentucky is kind of like, I mean, playing time could be a factor for them. One of Michigan's strategies right now is they're just loading up on dudes and seeing how they shake out. But that would be a tough one. But I mean, they're mid 4-star edge recruits. Michigan can replace them. You know, like, it's never really a problem for Michigan to get recruits the caliber of the Smith twins, and they're good recruits. But they're both 4-stars. They're in that 200 to 300 range. Maybe the higher ranked one is in like 150. I'm not exactly sure, but those are never going to be recruits that make or break you. You know, like Will Johnson was a make or break recruit. Like, that one Michigan had to have, and obviously the team looks much different without him this year. But is the team going to look a ton different without some developmental edge prospects? No. You know, they're going to find their guys. They're going to bring in a big class. They're going to have functionally, 105 scholarship players. They're going to develop them. They're going to put them under Ben Herbert, and everything's going to be fine.
Seth?
Yeah. I mean, look where Ohio State is right now. They just lost the last 2 games to Michigan. And Ohio State needs to have everything handed to them to function as Ohio State. That's what their program is built on right now. Right there, you're going to come here and you're going to win championships. You're going to beat your rival. You're going to get your gold pants. You're going to go high in the NFL. That's what Ohio State offers, right? That's what their program is about. We're the pro program. And they have not been delivering. So their Will Johnson was Aaron Scott. It's a guy with an Ohio State family in the heart of Ohio at a position where you have been sucking lately because you don't know how to develop guys. And you had this, and that's been Ohio State's problem. What were their other problem? Defensive tackle. They're just getting pushed out of the way by Michigan. So what do you need? You need a 5-star defensive tackle to come in and play right away. Those guys, if they lost Aaron Scott to Michigan, that is a 5-alarm fire for Ohio State. And it came close. So I think what we were doing with those guys is we were kind of reaching out and seeing how far you can get, right? Like, how deep does this go? And the fact that we even got that close with Aaron Scott tells you what state Ohio State is in, the program is in right now. Because that's a guy normally we're not fighting for. The NIL stuff has to get worked out. The Smith twins, always a little bit weird. I wrote one of the brothers up, and Alex wrote the other brother up, I think. But like, when we had 4 edges in the class, I was like, what are they doing here? Like, what's the point of this? Like, those guys are maybe a little further along. They've been on recruiting radars for so long. They're the kind of guys that I kind of think get overrated highly and then kind of fall back. And if they were a huge deal to Kentucky, and the 3 and 4 edges in Michigan's class at the time, I get that. I don't necessarily agree with Brian. I love that prospect that we lost. I thought that Michigan really could have developed him, and reasons to go to Miami are obvious. You can count them, and they're the color green.
Yeah, no doubt. I think NIL definite factor anytime you lose a guy to Miami, and I think it would be. This is my opinion on the matter. I think it would be a key factor in a flip of the Smith twins. And so understand the sentiment. And yet, while there's reason for some concern, panic, I think is an overstatement for a few reasons. You just named one. I remember talking about Notre Dame last year around this time. I said, let's wait for the season to roll around to see if they can maintain this momentum once games get played. I continue to say that if Ohio State gets beaten down by Michigan again, someone down there is getting fired. And that has the potential to affect current recruiting outcomes. That's number one. Number two, gradual as it may have been, we've seen some signs of some movement on the NIL front. The public endorsement of in partnership with Champion Circle, right? You know, the Empower deal, the Champion Circle deal with Learfield that they have now. So they're doing some things. I think the final pillar in this is the more NIL success Michigan can show for their current guys, your JJs, your Blakes, your Donovans, your Will Johnsons, that's functional, as is or as will be any NIL success that Jaden Davis has. It wasn't lost on me that Ohio State's quarterback commitment, there was just this announcement of this huge NIL deal that he got with some Tommy John or something, right? That kind of thing is important for Michigan and Jaden, because that has tangible value on the recruiting trail. That is Michigan's tool moving forward. Can they demonstrate NIL success, Brian? Because it gets to my last piece. The biggest recruit for Michigan in a long, long time is on it right down the road. And I think he's the biggest recruit since Drew Henson. And recruiting fortunes with him will dictate a lot moving forward to me, and that's Bryce Underwood.
Yeah, and Michigan's main competition with Bryce Underwood is LSU. And so do you think they're going to open up their checkbook? Yes, they are. I mean, LSU, big program, ton of fans, ton of money, and they like winning football games. So this is one guy that I do not think you are going to be able to get without matching what LSU is able to offer. And can Michigan do that? Yes. If they're so inclined, they can do it. Are they going to Queensberry's rules this away and be like, oh, I'm going to hold my nose at paying the number one recruit in the country to come to my school? We'll see. It seems like that would be the only thing that would change his mind at this point, right? Because it feels like he's on campus every other day, and he loves Kirk Campbell, and Michigan's right down the road. They've had more recent success than LSU, which is kind of scuffling a little bit, and it's close to home. So from everything that I've gathered, it looks like that's just going to be it. Like, if Michigan can match the number, they will get this kid. So match the number. That's it.
I just want to add to that, man. LSU is never going to have the greatest children's hospital in the country, in the world. And when you look at the names downstairs, like when you walk in, that's where Michigan people put their money first. And that's the donor class. Those are the same people we're talking about. So, like, are we going to put our money towards this, or are we going to put our money towards other things? We have a lot of other things that Michigan people put their money towards, and that's what we're competing with. And I think the question is a harder one to answer than we thought, because it's not like the money is just infinite. And they want to give to things that matter here. And in the LSU, they want to give it to quarterbacks.
Yeah, it's a great way to close, Seth. Best hospital in the world, in the country, in both. All right. So I can speak from experience there. Thanks a lot, fellas. Another very spirited discussion. To the rest of you, we'll see you tomorrow here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK.